My advice for learning tarot on your own. Introduction. I bought my first deck in 2010. Shortly afterward, I wound up paying for a membership at one of the more prominent message boards for tarot readers, and I also had friends who were learning tarot out here in the real world. Some of those people on the boards and my friends gave me advice that worked for them, but it didn't work very well for me. I want to be clear, I appreciate that they took the time to share what they had learned, to offer that to me, to help me to the best of their ability. And what follows here is the advice that I had to give myself ultimately to genuinely start learning tarot. And I'm trying to do this in a way that sidesteps what has happened to me, because the advice I needed was the opposite of advice that other people have needed. And so I'm going to try not to really put anybody in a box to say that there's one true way. So, this is my incredibly vague list of things that a new reader should consider when learning to read tarot on their own. And obviously, if you do have a mentor, then you should probably try to do what that mentor tells you instead of me. I am just someone on the internet. I would even say the same if you found a book you really love or an online course. Go through that first and then come back to something like this. Tarot is not a singular practice. Please understand in a liberating way for you that there is no singular way to read tarot cards. Everything I'm going to say is intended to help new readers explore until they find their own best practice. First, there are several traditions within tarot. The most common tradition is the Rider-Waite-Smith tradition, which started with the deck illustrated by Pamela Colman Smith and designed by A.E. Waite. The absolute majority of modern decks take inspiration from that classic Rider-Waite tarot, but we generally call the tradition and the deck the Rider-Waite-Smith to honor the artist who was Pamela Colman Smith. The Thoth or Thoth deck was designed by Aleister Crowley and illustrated by Lady Frida Harris. There are some decks which reinterpret this work through the experience and understanding of newer artists, but in this case, a lot of people still appreciate using the original deck. And the Marseille tradition, I hope I'm saying that right, is the name given to classic playing card style of tarot. This includes the Tarot de Marseille, the Visconti Sforza reproductions, and typically the 1JJ Swiss family of tarot decks. And modern decks are still created using the Marseille tradition with new artwork. An artist named Tomas Hijo, who works a lot with Insight Editions, has produced several Marseille tradition decks with licensed properties like Guillermo del Toro, the movie Labyrinth from 1986. And there are other traditions that exist, but the three I named above are the most prominent styles of decks that you might find. So on top of there being multiple traditions, more than just those three, there can be numerous practices within each tradition. Those can range from studying the minutiae of esoteric influences to discarding the little white book that came with your deck of cards and reading based purely on your own intuitive process. And all of this is to say that there are many ways to read tarot cards. There is no one right way, and you should not feel pressure to do it the one right way. My next big point is to please be patient with yourself. Learning this can take time, whether you find yourself on an intuitive path or whether you find yourself indulging in heavy studies, opening books, writing down your own study guide, any of it. Even the most intuitive readers I know spend their time with their decks daily just to have familiarity with the nuances, the symbols, the illustrations on each card. They get to know this deck inside and out, and even that takes time. So my advice here is also to be kind, be gentle, and be patient with yourself. No matter what your style of learning is, you will be surprised by how quickly all those small lessons begin to add up. My next piece of advice is to explore. If you're just starting out, please explore. Anyone who you ask for advice can only tell you what worked for them. I can only tell you what worked for me. Someone that you might meet on a message board or in a chat room in a tarot stream or something like that, they can tell you what worked for them. But the trick that you got to do here is find your specific relationship with this. Try a little of everything. Read a spread based entirely on intuition without looking at the book at all. Read a spread based entirely on what the book says to do. And then start to adjust and find where in the middle you actually are in your aptitude, in your mindset, in your talents. Read with spreads, the Celtic cross, the traditional 3-card past, present, future. Amazon sometimes will have a book like 1001 tarot spreads for a couple of dollars, and it's digital, but you can get it. But also lay down some cards with no spread. See where that takes you. Try them both and see whether you need that structure or whether you need the freedom. And again, explore how much you need to rely on the written designations of each card and how much of your intuitive process you need and what relative combination of both is going to make you the most effective as a reader. Explore different kinds of questions. And this is a big one to me. Try to predict things. Try to ask for just general advice. Ask, like, what would help me to know for the next 24 hours? Things like that. Practical advice. Ask anything else that comes to mind. But even ask the questions that you don't think are good to ask, just to try it out. And again, all of this is to explore. And in this case, this will help you find out what kind of questions you are better at answering. Be okay with getting things wrong from time to time. To this extent, I suggest when you do a practice reading, ask low stakes questions. Don't ask for big advice when you're first starting out. Ask for low stakes things. And you might get some wrong, but that'll also help you know what you can and can't answer. If you do get curious about some part of tarot, the symbols on the cards, why certain colors are used, maybe the history of it, maybe how we got to where we are in present day. If you get curious about any of it and it sounds like fun to learn it, then absolutely spend some time learning it, especially if it's fun, because that will also help you become a better reader. And everything I've said here about exploring things, being curious, all of that is to help you find your own strengths, because your strengths are not mine, and your strengths are not the person on social media or on a message board or on a video sharing site. Your strengths are yours. So absolutely explore to find those. And a little bit of that, my next piece of advice is to be selfish. Be selfish. Enjoy some quiet time away from devices and screens and televisions and anything that begs for your attention. Be selfish for that quiet time. Use that time to either read your cards, study your cards, open up your books if you use them, work on your journals if you journal. But even setting aside 10 minutes a day without screens and other people around and no one to demand your attention, that's a whole level of selfish that you get to be no matter what you're doing. So go ahead and be selfish about some quiet time. That's just good for your head, whether you're using the cards or just enjoying 10 minutes away from it all. Journaling is the next subject. I keep 2 journals. One is a rarely used journal where very important readings, like beginning of the year, birthday kind of thing, I will journal those. Or if my nightly reading is just a standout, just amazing read, doesn't mean good or bad, but it's just one of those incredible things that makes you stop and think. Those go into my reading journal. The other one that's more important to me is my handwritten study guide. And I built this out of classes I've taken, out of books I've read, out of my own experiences too, and my own ideas about these cards. My study guide has a space for each card and a space for each additional topic that I get curious about. You don't need to journal. You do not need to journal your readings, and you do not need to keep a study guide. But some sort of journaling is advice given to almost every new reader, and it is something that has helped me as well. So consider it, but don't feel committed to it unless you think that there is some reward in there for you. Or again, try to journal. Get a cheap 25-cent notebook when it's back to school season and see what happens when you start journaling. But my conclusion is this. If you are learning to read on your own, then you do need to find out what your practice genuinely is. I cannot tell you if you are ultimately a purely intuitive reader or if you need to build and read a library of books to read to your fullest potential. I cannot tell you what kind of questions you are capable of answering or not answering. All of this will need to come through your own exploration, through your daily reading for yourself, through those low stakes readings that I spoke about earlier. But I can give you encouragement and maybe a little permission to go your own way. Do not take the word of anybody on the internet, not even me. So my advice ultimately comes down to those 3 suggestions. Explore your practice to find what your best practice is. Find happiness in that process of exploring and learning. And be kind to yourself. And good luck.